Okay, so you were saying it's been evolving?
It has evolved over time, and largely it has been determined by the kind of political system that we've been using. Uh, when Zambia got independence, 64, we went straight into a multi-party system. So there were a lot of checks and balances then. So when we went into a one-party state around the 70s, uh, governance was woven around one political party. So checks and balances were supposedly within that system, but of course there are constraints because the freedoms to provide those checks and balances were not as would be expected in a system where there is a divergence of political views. Yeah. So now that we've gone back to multipartism, governance, the checks and balances in the form of governance that we have are much more clear. There's provision at least to see to it that whatever is expected of authorities is done, though a lot still needs to be done if certain laws are put into place.
So looking back 10 years ago and now, other than mentioning that there are more checks and balances that are being done now, and I think you mentioned that the provisions are more open, freedoms are better, what else has changed?
Over the past 10 years or thereabouts, we've seen a lot more work being done by two key institutions. One of them is the Office of the Auditor General, which provides closer scrutiny to the management of public resources. Although this institution has been there even before the past 10 years, we would usually get the reports coming 2, 3, 4 years after they've already done their audit work. But now they're quite relatively current, and therefore remedial measures can be done much earlier. And then we also have the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, which also keeps a close eye on the operations of public institutions and individuals. And these are done much more regularly, and therefore the management of institutions, the use of resources, and everything else that goes into public management of the institutions is much closer in terms of supervision and ensuring that everyone is doing what is expected of them, and recommendations given on what kind of punishment, if any, should be given. But of course, the concern that has arisen sometimes is that revelations may be made by these two institutions, but not much is done about taking the culprits to book. But now, as we get wiser in these areas, I think there'll be closer accountability expected of everyone who goes beyond the law or expectations of the offices they manage.
Okay. Do you think the public is involved in the process of holding officials accountable?
The public is involved, but not as deeply involved as it should be. To a large extent, for instance, I mentioned the Public Accounts Committee. The public may be represented through the respective members of Parliament who represent them, of course, in Parliament. And sometimes the public members of the public would give information to their representatives, and these are the issues that they bring forward to their parliamentarians or representatives to take to task anyone who is in these offices. But a lot more could be done, even at grassroots level. For instance, in councils, if the councils themselves were more open, well, they are open, but the public just so happens that they keep a distance from these institutions, and this is where, through the councillors, they will be able to ensure that the resources that come to these councils are used prudently for the purposes for which the monies are released. could be better. The public is involved, but it certainly could be better. The problem with that, I think, arises from the fact that some people, not many people, know about what role they can play in ensuring that they can play a role in ensuring that the resources that are meant for them are used for the purpose for which they are released. So it's a question of dissemination of information to the public. So it's only the enlightened people, people who have particular interest in maybe a project in the area, who may question what is happening or keep an eye on what is happening. Otherwise, the ordinary person on the street will just brush aside, so just does not know what the role they can play or what is happening or what the plans that are available.
Okay. Why do you think there is this lack of knowledge about these issues, or how people can play a role?
Firstly, I think it's a question of what people see as a priority in their living. For instance, a person who virtually has no job, his concern really is to find a job and to ensure he puts food on the table for himself and the family. So, of course, it could be better for him to know why there's no job by prodding further, but then not many people see it that way. They would think that it's not their responsibility to create jobs, for instance, or to know what their MP is doing or their councillor is doing, indeed the minister and right up to the president is doing. For them, as far as they're concerned, we've put these people in office and now it's their job to deliver what they promise, for instance, during an election and so on. They don't see it as their responsibility to constantly keep an eye, keep prodding, keep questioning, and demanding their right to work, for instance, as an example I've given. Sometimes also it's the people like us in the media who may not be playing the role of informing the public accordingly. And then some NGOs also whose responsibility it is to provide information, to enlighten the public about what their rights are not doing enough. I know there are lots of NGOs in the country, but most of them do not center their activities around dissemination of information, and many of them are centered around the urban areas. Lusaka, for instance, those in the members of the public in the rural areas don't quite get the kind of information that they deserve.
In a democracy, we say that the people are at the center of the rule. Do you think that applies to Zambia?
To some extent, yes, and some extent, no. And I think that is why the government is working towards decentralization as a way in which to take the power back to the people in real terms. You know, the people right from the grassroots are supposed to manage their own affairs, be able to make their own decisions, and determine on what is best for them, and not these decisions being made from the top and to go down to them. So to some extent I say no, because that is not, there's no decentralization yet. The center of governance, or the center of authority is still centralized. So I think with the decentralization policy that has been rolled out, we begin to see more of this authority and governance issues being going to the grassroots. So be people centered, that's it.
And you said yes because?
I say yes because we already have systems, a governance system which provides for representation of the people. Okay, for instance, right from ward level, which is I think the smallest unit of governance, you know, right through to the members of parliament and to cabinet, you know, the MPs are representatives of the people. But you find that one constituency can have hundreds or thousands of people. So for that MP to ably, get those people to know exactly what they need. On the surface of it, yes, she can know what the general issues are in that constituency, but you really need to get right down to the grassroots. Even at councillor level, some wards are so very big, and unless you really bring in the people to begin to make decisions for themselves, it's difficult. So the systems are there in certain instances. Yes, it does work. People do get to have a say in what they want, but as I said earlier, some people are still keeping their distance from being part of the decision-making process, and therefore it's a top-bottom sort of approach in decision-making.
Okay. What would you say are the challenges to democracy?
The challenges to democracy, first of all, for I who is in the media, the challenge is, of course, people understanding what democracy is. Okay. For some, it may be a win or die issue, but that's not what democracy is. So until people begin to know that in a democracy there are winners and there are losers, and there's always a provision for you, even who has lost, to still be represented by the person who is being voted into office, and therefore, everyone gets to benefit from the democracy. So the challenge, first of all, is for people to exactly know what democracy is, at least in the kind of democracy that Zambia has adopted. And secondly, it's again those that in certain instances may be a ward councillor or an MP, those that win these political seats may not grasp the reality that they are now representatives of everyone in the area that they're born. So again, it's a question of being accommodative of each other in such a system. Then secondly, another challenge is that although we are now going towards that, we have not had much, in my opinion, of sort of issue-based politics, okay, especially during campaigns. Certain players who want to personalize issues, to become very personal. Of course, it's important to know what kind of a person that is seeking public office, but I think that should not form the core of an election campaign, let alone the works that you do after you get that you get into office. So we need to begin to understand more about what is expected of a person who goes into office. It's a service that they are supposed to provide to the public, whatever level it is. Then for Zambia, again, the problem is the vastness of the country. We may not, or even the political players may not be able to adequately get to all corners of the country to relay their message on why they should be voted into office. So along the line, you might send a representative to campaign for you and so on, but along the way, you find that your message may be distorted, and therefore people may not vote based on an informed information. They may not quite get the truth of what it is that or reason why they are voting for a particular candidate. Then another challenge we have is that resources. Many people want to get into politics because they believe they have brilliant ideas, but they do not have the financial resources in which they need to go around the country to market their ideas. So it's only those with a financial muscle that get a bigger opportunity or chance to actually get into office. At whatever level. If you don't have the resources, it's very difficult for you to convince people that you are the right person. Because many times people will say, if you yourself cannot even find resources for yourself, how then can you be able to, or how can we trust you with resources of the public, when you get into office? So that's another challenge. For women have often said, to an extent I do agree with them. They say they find the political landscape too volatile. So may I just pick this color?